So one thing that's interesting about this podcast, I think it's cool that there's three different perspectives here. We have me, I'm 18, about to be 19. And then we have the next generation and then the next generation. So it's three different perspectives, and I think that's really cool because we can all give a different insight to like the different things we're talking about. And I think that's going to be really handy going into the topics that we're starting to get into in the past couple with like the scripture and Halloween and stuff. But today I think it's going to be especially cool because we're going to talk a little bit about what our quiet times look like. A quiet time being the time that you spend alone with God every day. You get rid of those distractions, you pray, you read the Word, and you dedicate that small amount of time to God.
Right, and with this quiet time, it's specifically a dedicated time to God. It's not just I'm praying throughout the day, or I prayed for my meal or whatever.
Which you should do.
Like, you should be praying all day. You should be praying without ceasing, this, nonstop connection with God, essentially. But we also need to take a specific time out of the day, and it can change, and, a matter of time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, goes for you. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but specifically put this time to read your Bible and pray and listen to God.
So basically what we're talking about here, praying, reading Scripture, is developing and building that relationship between yourself and God.
Yeah.
And again, that's one of the things I always emphasize is Christianity. I like to say Christianity is not a religion. Christianity is a relationship between God and his people. And like any relationship, you get out of it what you invest into it. I mean, think of the people that you are closest to. Why are you closer to some people than you are to other people?
Yeah.
Why? And it comes down to the amount of time.
Well, and the dynamic changes.
You build that relationship by spending time together.
Right.
The people you spend the most time with, the people that you're most vulnerable with, are the people that you're closest to. I am very picky with the word friend. I think that just gets thrown out a lot by people today. Facebook. Oh, you're friends with so-and-so.
Right.
No, I'm not.
It's like, I got 1,000 friends on Facebook. I don't know more than half of them.
Right. But a friend to me, there are certain criteria that has to meet. You'll probably run into people if you went to some of the places where I've served and asked them if they knew me. Oh, yeah, I know Jeremy. Yeah, we're really good friends. Are we? I haven't talked to you in 10 years.
Right.
No, there's no relation.
Knowing who somebody is not the same as being their friend.
Exactly. It's just a passing acquaintance.
Right.
And that happens with relationships. I mean, God brings people into your life for a season. Some seasons are longer than others. But it all comes down, for me, it's a relationship. And the relationship that you have with God, you have to look at it that way. Sometimes you're having a great relationship, you're in sync. Then sometimes you're kind of down in a valley.
Yeah.
And you're kind of estranged for a little bit for whatever reasons. And I think that it is very important for us to be very transparent and open with our audience. And I'll just let you guys know, right now, for me personally, my relationship with God is very strained at this moment. It has been a rough, almost year.
Yeah. Well, you've gone through a lot.
Yes. And I know, you've asked me to share some of this before, and I've just kind of put it off. But I think as we're going to get into this discussion of building a relationship with God, I'm going to be very upfront here and say my relationship right now is probably not quite as strong as yours, because I can probably guarantee you you're both spending more time with God right now than I am. And that's for a lot of reasons. It's been a rough 2 years. I mean, I'll just back up a little bit. And this
Been a
is
rough 3 years ever since I've known you.
this is
It's my
and,
fault.
I'll just say, yes, it's all been your fault. My life was so much.
So it all went south.
It all
whenever
went
Wes
south
came into
when
your
Wes,
life.
yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And actually, when he brought his wife with him,
Right?
Um, but let's go back to, and just bear with me. This is going to be very hard, but I think it's important to share.
And for those of you who are listening, I think you should really listen, because
This
Jeremy,
may never happen again.
this may never happen again. And Jeremy
Um,
Jeremy felt convicted to share this.
Well, let's go back to the pandemic. I mean, I've shared before, that's really where kind of all of this started, as we were, God shut the world down. And you really, unfortunately, and this is for the whole country and probably the whole world, but I can only speak to my personal experience. But during the pandemic, you really saw the underbelly of the church. People's true character came to the surface. And it was a little disturbing. And I just began thinking, God began to work with me like, we can't go back to what we were doing. We have got to be better than what we were. Unfortunately, there was no interest in doing that. And we just went back as things began to open up. And it just bothered me.
God's people broke your heart.
Yes. There were multiple events that happened during that pandemic that disappointed me, disillusioned me, and caused me to lose faith in that particular body of believers. At the same time we're going through this, God is doing something in my house with a student that I'm mentoring and discipling. And I can kind of see the direction that it's going. And I don't want to go, because I've been down that road before. And it didn't end well. And I begged. It's like, no. I told God, I said, thanks, but no thanks. And if you ever want to hear God audibly laugh, tell him no when he says you're going to do something. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. And I was focused on the ministry still at the church. But the more that God kept calling me over here in this direction, I was like, okay, Lord, I will do that. But before I do that, I have to have A, B, and C checked off the list. Mm-hmm. And so while I'm trying to get A, B, and C checked off the list, things in the church are getting worse. And it finally just reaches a level of, for me, it was toxic. You're sitting in meetings and being told that this ministry you're giving your life to, that you're pouring yourself into, and being told that it's not good. And, you sit there and go, well, I'm here, I'm serving the Lord. I'm not here to serve man. Mm-hmm. But about the second or third time you sit in a meeting and you're told, you're terrible at your job. I think it was like a light went off and it's like, oh, they just don't want me here. And the Lord convicted me. It's like, how long are you going to put up with this when I've already told you to go and do this other thing? So I resigned, literally packed up everything I had.
And hold on, though. You resigned, but you didn't have your checklist.
No, the check.
And you're,
the
and you're talking
checklist
about resigning from your worship.
from the worship leading position at
Okay.
this church. I resigned from that. There was nothing in place. It was stepping out on faith.
No job.
No job,
No place to go.
no place to live. Just God saying. I mean, it was.
And you lived in the church's property.
I lived in the parsonage, so when I resigned my position, I lost my house,
right.
and it was a step of faith. God is saying, "Go here," kind of almost exactly like He did for Abraham. To get up and go.
Yeah.
He didn't tell him, and when you get there, you're going to have this job,
Yeah.
and you're going to live in this place.
Right.
It was just like, go. And that's another thing. The hard lesson I had to learn was genuine faith. That's another word that just gets thrown out constantly. It's faith. And we all like to say we have faith until it's actually put to the test. It's like I'm going to pray for patience. Don't ever pray for patience, because God will just God will give you opportunities to be patient. And then you will learn that you have no patience. And it's almost the same with faith.
And every
Like,
other thing that you pray.
Everything, yeah.
Yep.
You say, God, give me this, and He gives you opportunities to exercise that, and you find out just how lacking
Yeah.
you are. So stepped out in faith and went down to Murfreesboro, Nashville area, down there. And I was under no delusions that it was going to be easy.
Right.
I knew it was going to be hard. I did not know it was going to be as hard as it ended up being. But even in the midst of how hard it was, and because you walked through that with me,
Yeah.
you and Katie both, I still felt like this is where God told me to be. I was doing His will. So then, 8-9 months into this, God flips the plan. And
To what you understand it to be.
yes,
What did you think the plan was?
it was not what it ended up being.
So you were told, you felt like God was saying, hey, go over here to this Nashville area and do what?
And I was going to help this student with their music, growing in their music
And
abilities.
this is the same one you talked about earlier. The same student.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Because, well, that's a whole nother story. But the Lord did things to where it was very obvious He was in that. And so it's like I knew that this was what we were supposed to be doing, even though it was hard. And then it changed. And I was confused. And what ended up happening was I had to come back, and it crushed me. I was I was mad because I was like, Lord, I was doing what you told me to do.
Well, you sold, you're a big comic book guy, and you sold all your comic
I
books.
sold everything I could possibly
Yeah.
sell to get down there.
And then when you left, you still didn't, there was bills that you couldn't
were-
pay.
Exactly.
And then when you came here, you didn't really have a place to go except
Right.
for just staying at a friend's house.
I had options of where I could be. I just didn't have my own space.
Right.
And I was angry for a long time. I was confused. It's like, Lord, I did exactly what you told me to do. And here I am.
Why am I stuck in a friend's basement?
I was
Just
confused.
No job.
And I got to a point to where you and your wife said, you have to go get antidepressants. Like, you forced me to go do that. And I remember going to that appointment, and the doctor that I talked to was just asking, well, what's going on? And about the fourth sentence that started with, I lost, it was just like, yeah, it's been a season of loss. Because a couple of months after we got to Nashville, my mom died. She'd had cancer for over a year. We thought she was coming back, didn't know she was as sick as she was. And then she passed away, and so there's guilt. Oh, I shouldn't have left.
Yeah, because you were so much further away from her.
Right.
And you moved 5 hours away, and you were already like 2 hours away from her,
Right.
weren't you?
Right. So it's like, I lost, God told me to give up the ministry at the church. Lost, my mother passed away, lost,
Music ministry was all you ever knew.
that's all I have known since I was in high school.
Yeah.
I was very lost because it's like, well, what is my purpose now? And you come back here, and there are things, we still had folks from that church body that would reach out and check in on us. How are you doing? Then things happened, and God took you out of that church. And then we lost our friends.
Right. We stopped hearing from them. It just kind of trickled away. Like they would start to talk, and then out of sight, out of mind.
Well, it's to the point now that Eli's pretty much the only one that associates with us. And it hurts my heart to hear him, to know that he is looked at and treated differently by those people because he associates with us. It hurts my heart to hear him say that people have told him, well, it's good that you don't care about your reputation with the church. And it's like,
Why is it in jeopardy?
it's like, what did we do wrong?
Well, I don't think that sentence itself is wrong. I think it's like the fact that it even has
Exactly.
to be said.
That's the thing.
That's
the
right,
fact
yeah.
that it even has to be said is sad. And the only thing I can come up with, the only crime that I think we committed was when we were there, invested in ministry there, we followed the leadership and the guidance of the Holy Spirit instead of the leadership of the deacon chairman and the personnel committee. That's the only crime I can come up with that we committed. But
Let's say the people of the church.
no, I'm saying what I said.
Okay.
And but we are treated as outcasts, and that hurts. So I have just been in this season of pain. I had to make a trip back down to Murfreesboro last weekend because some packages got delivered to the old address. And I remember driving back into town, and there's this sense of like unfinished business. Like there was so much wasted potential here that just never got realized. And it's very hard for me, and I'll just speak bluntly and honestly here, it is very hard for me to live here because I'm constantly reminded of the hurt. And you, amazing, I don't know how you do it, but it doesn't bother you. It just kind of rolls off I get so invested in people when I'm ministering that when a friendship or relationship ends, to me, it is almost like a death. And I grieve it like it is a death.
Yeah.
And I'm almost to the point, what are the 7 stages of grief? Denial. Denial's one, and then there's
Acceptance.
acceptance is the end.
Yeah.
And I've gone through all of those. I'm almost at acceptance. Almost. Not quite there. So I have been asking this whole time is like, I don't get it. I am angry at God. And I have read the book of Job and Jonah many times over these last few months. But it's just, there is no desire anymore. I've had a few invitations come through for people wanting me to go and sing at events or
Yeah.
services. And I just said, thank you, but no thanks. I got an invitation from the worship leader at one of my former churches who asked if I was available to come for Sunday in December, because he's like, you do so good with the Christmas music, and I know they would love to hear you sing. So do you have a Sunday in December and you can come? And I told him, I said, thank you for the invitation. I said, but right now I am pretty much retired from music and worship leading. I told him I would think about it. I didn't just come right out and say no. But I told him, I said, I really don't do the music or the worship leading anymore. And I haven't. I don't think I have sung a note since January. I was in the car on my road trip over the weekend, and I was singing, and I noticed about halfway through the second song, my jaw hurt. And it's just because it's like any muscle you don't work out. If you try to use it, it's going to be sore. And I'm like, why does my jaw hurt? And it's like, because that's the first time I've actually tried to sing
And
in
you know,
months.
you had all these emotions because you were hurt, and it's okay to be hurt. It's okay
Well-
to be angry, even.
And that's what I want to tell people. I had a conversation with a family friend months ago, and she was still struggling with her husband passing away. Why did he have to die? He was such a good person. I don't get it. I don't understand it. So I was trying to talk to her about this concept of relationship. And I said, God can handle your questions. God can handle your emotions. He gave us emotions. Read Psalms. I mean, David goes through the whole gamut of emotion.
He
in
gets
Psalms.
angry with God.
He gets angry. It's okay. God's a big boy. He can take
That's right.
your frustration. Psalm 34, I've got it open here. 34 verse, I believe 18. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And that was going through my head yesterday and today as I was driving with work. And my question at one time, about, fourth or fifth time it went through my head, I'm like, okay, God, but what if you're the one who's crushed my spirit? What do we do with that? And it's like, I still talk to God. But it's like, and it's with anybody. If you hurt me, I'm going to keep you at arm's length.
Right.
Because it's like, okay, I know you bite now. So you stay over there and let's talk, but I'm not going to let you over here.
Right.
That's kind of where I am with God right now. It's like, God, you hurt me. And I know there is a reason. And I may not know what it is this side of eternity. It frustrates me because it's like, Lord, I poured my whole life into this, doing what you told me to do. And now what? And I said, I'm here. It hurts to know that there are people. It is very hard when you are a church staff person to build genuine relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Because you never know who's being nice to, are they being nice to Jeremy, or are they just cozying up to the choir director?
Mm-hmm.
That's very hard to
Right.
do.
And then who's going to stab you in the back?
And
I've had friends that did that.
fortunately, I have not had anyone stab me in the back. But what hurts is when they just ignore you.
Yeah.
I have people that I have invested in, people I let the wall down and let them into developed relationships with. They drive by this street multiple times a day. But you wouldn't know that they were in the same universe. And people try to say, well, I'm just so busy. That doesn't work, because you're never too busy for the people and the things that matter to you, if they're a priority. And it's like a quiet time. Do you make that a priority? Is that a priority of getting into the Word and spending time with God? And I'll just tell you right now, that has not been a priority for me, because I'm just still trying to process. and I know if I get in and read, I might get some answers. You know, you've invited me to go to church with you a few times. I'm just not to that point yet where I'm ready to walk into a church. And for various reasons. I mean, take the last church experience and then add that to other church experiences that I've had. I'm carrying about 25 years worth of church hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And so right now, it's like, I'll just watch a service online. Thank you very much. Because it's like, why go and get plugged in, be part of a body? They're just going to hurt me too.
Right.
Now, that's where I am. And I realize it's for a season. And I will eventually come out of that. But I didn't want to go into this discussion about quiet time and relationship with God and be like, oh, yeah, you need to do this, you need to be this. Because right now, I don't want to hear it. It's like, I did what I was told to do. And from my perspective, it's probably because you always preach at me that, I'm looking at it from the wrong thing. But from my perspective, it's still like it just blew up in my face.
Yeah.
And that hurts. And then to still have to be, like, when I was down there last week, it's like, I think I texted you and said, I miss this place.
Yeah.
Like, because it's just like every little bit, it's just like a poke. Like, oh, remember that? That hurts, doesn't it? Mm. Oh, yeah, it kind of stings.
It's like all the scars are just reminded of.
Yeah, it's like you associate it with
it's raw.
The hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to know that there are people who I guess, we just don't have relationships with anymore because it's going to hurt their reputation. That is just sad to me, and it hurts. So that's where I am at as we talk about quiet time and relationship with God. I have a relationship. We talk, but it's a strained relationship at the moment.
And like you said, that's a season, and that's how things go. I remember I've been in positions where it was strained. My wife has had seasons that it's been strained. She's had those for over a year or more than that. And Jeremy, I love that you opened up about this.
It's a great testimony.
I'm sure there's going to be people that are upset, like, how could you say that? And here's what people don't understand. We may be pastors, and we may be, called to ministry for vocational ministry, but we're people too. We're human.
And that's something I want to discuss later on down the road is pastors and mental health.
Yes.
Because for some reason, people think they can talk to pastors, treat pastors. Like, I would never dream. I know nothing about cars other than turn the key and they turn on. I know nothing about cars. Why in the world would I ever walk into a garage or a car dealership and tell the people who work there they don't know what they're doing?
Right.
But there are people in churches who feel perfectly free to go and tell someone, you don't know how to do your job.
And as staff, I mean, it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And, give a compliment sandwich or something.
Well, especially when you think that you're doing it the way that you are supposed to be doing it. Like
exactly.
God led.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that's hard whenever you think that you're doing it the way God's telling you to do it, and then man tells you that you need to be doing it differently. I'm not gonna lie, that was way more bold than I was expecting it. Like that was
no, and I said what I said.
I love it. There's gonna be a lot of people that hear this that will not like what has been said. Well, I said, that was really, I love that. That was way more bold than I was expecting.
It's the truth.
But there's going to be a handful of people that hate it, and they're going to be mad.
Well,
but there's going to be a whole lot more people that need to hear this so that they can heal too. Part of this ministry is for church hurt, for people that have been hurt by the church. We want to counsel you. We want to work with you. Jeremy, you mentioned the antidepressants. You started those several months ago, or a few months ago. And
a little over a month ago.
It's been longer than that.
Okay.
It has.
Oh, yeah, June.
Yeah.
It's June something.
We're in
'Cause it's
We're
October.
in October, buddy.
Yeah, Halloween's coming, and then it's gonna be time
We're
for.
almost November.
You know
Like,
what is like? As soon as Halloween's over, the next day I go into work and I go into these stores, and they're gonna be playing Christmas music.
Yeah.
I can't stand that.
We still need to talk about Elvis and Blue Christmas. So, but anyway, you
I'll
were
listen to it on
saying.
the way home.
Well, people need to hear what you've gone through. Pastors need to hear it so that they can understand. There's people that just go to church that, question yourself. Am I hurting my staff? Or am I encouraging the staff? Am I nitpicking? And the stuff that you're talking about wasn't like, that was not biblical or whatever.
No,
They
we're
were-
talking about personal attacks.
Yeah.
No theological issues.
No.
Absolutely
No.
not.
Okay.
And they were personal things.
Right.
I don't like the way you dressed, or I don't like that you took the choir chairs out.
How dare you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What have you done? You're told it's crazy how people and then it goes into, you mentioned the personnel committee. Okay. They come in your office and they start saying stuff and they say, now this is just between us. And I've been told so many times, it's just between us. We're not saying anything, and things come out and they'll go around and say, oh, that's to protect him. We're just trying to protect Jeremy. We're trying to protect Wes. And it's like, oh, please tell them. I'm an open book.
Well, and that's
ask
something
all you want.
No. And that's why I felt I needed to share was you have to have transparency.
Yes.
And openness. There was an event that had happened during the pandemic that almost split the church. And I remember the committee was trying to cover it up.
Yeah.
And I was in the parking lot talking with a parent of one of the students in the youth group. And another parent came up and she said, I wish someone would tell me the truth. And I said, what do you want to know? I heard the whole thing. Yeah. I will tell you the truth.
And see, when there's secrecy like that of, now this is just between us, that's where sin can get
Maybe
involved.
that is my crime, was I told the truth.
Probably. But what people don't get, look, I'm not saying that every single thing, every single decision, everything that's happening in the church needs to be just told from the rooftops. That's not what I'm saying. But most of it should be.
Right.
Most of it should be completely transparent. But I can't tell you how many meetings that I was a part of where it's like, now this is just between us. This isn't, we're not talking about somebody's confidential, sins that they're confessing to us
Right.
and that we're trying to counsel them through.
And I had to try to put this in perspective. Was God, and I do think he used a lot of that hurt and a lot of that, because it seemed to come out of nowhere all of a sudden. It's like somewhere around Christmas, there was a group of people that just turned on me.
Yeah.
And then they just started to gather their friends or whatever. And I'm like, where is this coming from? And I would pray. It's like, Lord, is this you using this to get me to go and do what you told me to do?
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. So at the same time, I'm like, well, can I really hold these people responsible and accountable if they were just being used by God? But it's like, they're grown people.
Right.
They knew the words that were coming out of their mouths.
Yeah.
Now, I don't mean we don't need to get on a whole tangent, but it was important for me because we're going to talk about quiet time, spending time with God.
Next episode.
I'm trying to come back, Eli. I'm trying to come back.
I love where this is gone. I wouldn't even worry about it. Just go where you feel like you need to go.
But it was like, I can't sit here and honestly have that conversation like, yeah, I do this and I do that, because right now I don't.
The conversation about the quiet time.
A quiet time about getting in the Word and there's prayer that goes back and forth. It's not deep right now.
Right.
It's like,
Well,
Lord,
it is in a way.
It's like, Lord,
because it's not shallow. It's not the surface of like, oh, everything with me is great.
right.
This is deep. You're
And-
sharing personal convictions, personal emotions.
Which is great because you're not masking yourself right now.
What I struggle with right now is, we're all called to serve God some way or another. And it's like I've told people I'm not going back on a church staff.
Yeah.
I remember applying for a church staff position down in Murfreesboro. Got an email back, saw the words personnel committee in the email, and sent a polite thanks but no thanks.
Right.
And then got a call from their pastor who just wanted to check and
Oh,
make
man.
sure. Yeah.
I'm so glad you're sharing this. Keep going. Keep
He
going.
said, I just wanted to call and talk to you. And I said, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. And I said, I saw the words personnel committee in that email. And it was just like I ran in the opposite direction. And he laughed. And he said, I feel you, brother. I
Yep.
feel you. And he said, normally there's a separate team that does searches for staff members, but with the pandemic and everything, it's like, we already have a personnel committee. Just
Right.
let them. I said, no.
I want Jeremy. I want you to clarify something because there's going to be people that listen to this and, oh, y'all are just bitter pastors, and they're just going to, say all these things.
Well, they've already said that.
Well, right, but there's going to be more after this.
Right.
A lot
Why?
more.
Explain to me why. Okay, so we recorded this episode. Just so everybody knows, we recorded this episode about a quiet time last night,
Right.
and you sent a text 5-6 hours ago, I guess.
Sometime
It was
today.
not long ago.
And you said you really wanted to redo this.
This is in our DDS Faith podcast plus permanent guest group chat.
Yes.
So, Jeremy, I want you to just tell us what made you decide to share this.
Well, it's like I said, we can't sit here, or I can't sit here and be part of a discussion about Bible study and quiet time and praying and one-on-one time with God when my own personal relationship is not what we're going to talk about.
Right.
My own personal relationship with God right now, like I said, is strained.
But that's okay because you're working on it.
You're working on it.
And
You
you're
do
aware.
that. Yeah. If I was not aware,
Yeah, that would be a bigger problem.
And we've done 8 or 9 other episodes. I can't remember how many. And you haven't sounded bitter whatsoever.
well, I've tried to be very careful about what I said.
And you
See,
remain objective.
I don't know what's their definition of I am hurt.
Exactly.
I don't know if I'm not really angry anymore,
Yeah.
but I'm still hurt. Now, the people who are going to get mad, I'm not really concerned. They don't hurt me anymore.
Yeah.
What hurts me are the people that I considered friends, that I
Right.
thought I had relationships with outside of the church, who, for whatever reason, are now too busy to acknowledge my existence.
Right.
That hurts. And sometimes and it's just the way I grew up, when I'm hurt, it may come across as I'm mad,
Right.
but I'm hurt.
Well, you're not sharing this tonight out of anger. You're
No.
sharing this tonight out of conviction.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's cool because last night you didn't say a word about any of this when we recorded the first Quiet Time episode. And
Well, you did. You didn't put on any facade or whatever.
right,
but
I'm
you
just saying
kind of
you obviously wrestled with it.
Well, because before we even started, you mentioned that someone at that church told you that they were glad you weren't worried about your church reputation. That hurt.
right.
Not is it what they said hurt or the fact that it has
No,
to
it's
be
the
said?
fact that it had
Okay,
to be
yeah, just-
said.
Okay.
Well, and
It's
also,
not the phrase. The phrase is fine.
Yeah.
Because honestly, we should all be that way. But
Right. Well,
it's
in
the-
this instance, I think he was.
It's the
more
fact-
acknowledging the fact, like, hey, this is good that you don't care.
right, but it's the fact that associating with us implies some sort of
Well, let me speak on that for a second. Let me have my moment of boldness here.
Go ahead.
just call this one bold.
Listen, there's gonna be people that hear this that know who I am. Listen to this objectively in the sense, don't listen to who it's coming from. Listen to the message. If you think that these two are bitter about it, then that should not affect how you take it.
You're saying that even if we were bitter,
Yes, even if they are bitter.
the message is still the message.
And I heard the breath there.
Well, what I was going to say is, he's not of the two of us. He has the most reason to be bitter.
Absolutely.
Because as badly as I was treated, it was like they set him on fire.
Twice.
And if anybody has just cause to be bitter, it would be him. But he's not.
For whatever reason, I can't tell you why.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say I'm bitter.
You should boast about that like a lot. Like be prideful.
I'm hurt, and like I said,
I'm not bitter, but I got some pride.
and like I said, and the group of people who are going to say, "Oh, he's just mad and he's just bitter," I don't care.
Well, they're trying to use it as a reason to write you off.
Right.
But it's like, what you say matters.
Well, and like I said, the content that has been discussed on here, who it's coming from should not affect how you take it as a listener, not
Right.
a viewer, a listener. That should not affect how you take it. If you really have to, pretend it's not coming from Wes and Jeremy. And for my own personal convictions, I can go ahead and tell you, I don't care whether they're bitter or not. That does not affect the reason why I'm on here. I would not be on here if it wasn't for me feeling like I need to be on here. When Wes texted me and said, "Do you want to be on this episode?" And this is before I knew I'd be on the next 10 of them.
We were only going to invite you for one.
Yeah, you were only supposed to be here one time.
The first thing I said when he texted me was, "Let me pray about it." So he texted me the day after and said, have you prayed about it?
Are you done praying? Are you done praying?
24 hours later. I took this very seriously, and I'm aware of what people will think about me by associating myself with Wes and Jeremy.
And that's what makes me sad.
Right. And I haven't had a whole lot of things said to me to my face.
Well, because
That's how it's going to go.
That's how it goes. Nobody
And
says it to your face.
You can sense things.
unless they say it
However-
behind closed doors, and then they tell you, "Now, don't let it go out of this room."
Like, listen to this very carefully, though. I don't care. I obviously don't care, considering I've been back many times.
And it's hard not to care.
Right. I talked to Wes about my call to ministry March of 2021, so that was a year and a half ago,
Oh my goodness.
which is crazy to me. And I think it's so cool how all this lined up, because one time after youth, he may or may not have been my youth pastor.
Just go ahead.
He told me
We are down the rabbit hole
you,
now.
and, you
Genie is out of the
this is a
bottle.
long episode.
It's fine.
So, we talked about earlier when he said, I wouldn't say personal opinion. You went, I said what I said.
What I said.
I was like, dang. All right.
I was just going to say people of the church. But anyway, go ahead.
You might remember this. This is probably a year after I talked to him about maybe being called to ministry. And he said, man, I've thought you were called to ministry even before you came to me. Back me up on that.
Yeah.
Did you think that?
Mm-hmm.
Even before I came to him. And it almost made him excited
That you finally figured
I
it out.
finally figured it out. And I thought that was so cool.
But I didn't tell you then. I
No, he
waited.
did not tell me. And he would,
I waited until you had a full committed.
and you
like,
would, you
I'm
would
doing
still
it.
never, to this day, you wouldn't tell me whether I am or not.
Correct.
I think that I am, or I know that I am.
That is between you and God.
Right. And the same thing with salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's so cool how all this has worked out, because you were pulled away from the church that I attend. And then you asked me to be on this podcast, and that's cool, because you've discipled me for the past 3-4 years, however long it's been, and how all that lined up. And then when you were pulled apart from the church, the same church before he was, and now all this has come full circle. And I don't know where I was going with that, but I would not be on here if it wasn't for my own personal conviction saying be on that podcast. Like, I don't know whether I'm called to a traditional pastor job. I don't know if I'm called to a ministry like this. I don't know if I'm called to travel the globe sharing the gospel. I don't know. But I do know that right now I'm supposed to be on this podcast, and what people will assume about me or their feelings, I don't care about. And that's not something that's going to decide whether I'm on here or not. And that a lot of people are not going to like that and everything that's been said. I'm so shocked that this went in the direction that it did. But
it's the difference between fearing God and fearing man. And most people will say, well, most Christians will say, I absolutely fear God more than I fear man. That is not true. Mm-hmm. Because in some ways, man's a lot more scary than God, because you know what? God forgives. Man often doesn't. And man is flawed. So sometimes, and a lot of times, the repercussions of what man can do is, felt a lot quicker than waiting on whatever God might do, his discipline or whatever.
Well, and I thought it was cool earlier how you mentioned how this could potentially help pastors or anybody that has been hurt by the church, and that's why it's important. Like, all this isn't being said just so we can vent. And
this isn't venting.
He's not just getting it off his chest.
I have held this in.
No, yeah.
For
but he's not just getting this off his chest, and neither is Wes.
You've vented before.
You've asked me to share some things, and I'm like, I'm not
not ready.
That.
You're not ready.
Not doing that.
And
but as we're sitting here talking about quiet times and relationship with God, it's like I can't sit here and pretend like my relationship with God is great, because right now it's not, and here's why it is not.
And here's the thing: what the audience needs to understand is that we're still growing,
right?
And we're changing.
I'm the oldest one here, and still growing.
I've grown since we started this in September, and actually, we actually started putting it together starting in June. Mm-hmm. It's crazy how fast this has just gone, and honestly, I'm in such a different place. And maybe I'll share my testimony here one day up on this. But I was just telling Katie last night, my wife, and we were just talking, and I was just like, I love the relationship I have with God right now. I miss preaching. I miss pastoring and doing all those things in youth ministry. I love it.
And see,
I miss it.
I don't.
You
right
don't.
Now. I don't.
But I have never been so on fire than I am right now. And I'm working a secular job, and I've witnessed.
Me too.
I've had so many opportunities to witness to people and to talk to people and care about them and really actually do something instead of just being cooped up in an office all day.
Well, that's the same with me. Now I am working for a Christian book distributor, but you're out in Walmarts and grocery stores and drugstores. You're out in the community.
And as pastors, you're getting opportunities you haven't had in years, because pastors are always just cooped up in their office. And you know what? I tried to get out of my office. I got in trouble for it. It's like, you're out of the office too much. It's like, I'm witnessing and I'm trying to make disciples. I've had so many opportunities to witness to people and just love on them and do things through this ministry. And, one thing that I learned from your experience, from what you have gone through this past 18 months that you just shared about.
And that was the Reader's Digest condensed version.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yes. But one thing that
I'm sorry. Reader's Digest is a magazine, and back in the 60s, 70s, they would take books.
Oh, my goodness.
And they would, put 2 or 3 books in one, and they would condense them, which means, they would leave out
so you could, digest the reading material easier?
So, yeah. It's just I left some things out. I just condensed the story.
The one thing that I learned from your experiences is that our success should not be gauged on what we think the outcome should be.
Yes, because you've preached that to me many times.
Maybe,
I know.
So numbers. Is that what you're kind of
Well, there's a lot of things. Like, he had expectations. He was like, okay, I'm going to go to Murfreesboro, and I'm going to disciple this kid, and, he's going to get in the recording studio, and he's going to be in the music world, and he's going to go and do all these things. You have expectations. Jonah, perfect example. He, finally, when he eventually went to Nineveh, he was disappointed in the result, because he was like, where's the hellfire and brimstone, Lord? And God's like, they repented. Like I told him, if they would repent, I would spare them. And you know, the book just kind of ends with him being upset.
Well, and as somebody, like as somebody that could be pouring into somebody or discipling somebody, you don't know the ripple effect that
Yes.
that could have on their life, and you will learn that when you're pouring into them, they'll take things from you that you don't even realize, like just them watching the way you do life, and that's going to go a long way.
Our success should not be measured based on what we think the results should be. Our success should be gauged by our obedience to God. And that is what I learned from your experience.
And that's what you preached to me. It's like you were obedient. You were, because
Yes.
I said, I would say this was just a colossal failure.
Right.
And you were like, no. And you would give me that sermon
Well,
you just
and-
But
gave me.
but that's something that I had never considered before, you know. And I had been through some similar situations that you've been in, and I was just so encouraged by you. I really was. As I know you don't feel like you handled it well here and there, whatever. No, nobody does everything perfect. I've handled plenty of things horribly, you know. And that's just what this. That's what this podcast is about. We're being real.
Well, and I just, another moment of realness here is when this whole thing started, I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And I basically was doing it as a favor
Well,
to you.
I told you. I said, you're a part of this ministry, whether you know it or not.
And there are many times where I sit down here and I'm not in it. I don't want to be here. But when we're done, it's like, okay, good. I'm glad we did that. Yeah.
Well, and as we continued on, and, you know, you started taking the medication. Hey, that helps.
Yes.
Listen, there's a lot of people out
Take
there.
your meds.
And we could talk about this mental health thing, but, you know, I've been asked the question, you know, and I used to think this way. But how could you be filled with the Holy Spirit and be depressed? And have to take medication
we'll
and
talk about that.
antidepressants. Yeah, we will absolutely talk about that. But if you're depressed, it's okay to take antidepressants. There's nothing wrong with that. It's important. You need to take care of your mental health. And pastors' mental health is in a crisis.
Right.
And they can't share with
There's
anybody.
a lot of statistics that back what you just said.
Well,
know.
and then it all kind of came to the surface when the pandemic hit. Like I
Right.
said, you saw the underbelly
Yeah.
of the church.
And, you know, as we've gone through these episodes, though, you've started to contribute more. And, like, now you're texting about it.
that Halloween episode was his idea.
Yeah,
He
that
made
was
the notes
totally
for it.
100%
That was on him. And that was good.
actually, he's got other notes now. You know, and before he was like, "No, I'm just doing it for Wes." And now, like as he does it,
He's
more,
showing off his humility right now.
Well, the first few weeks I sat here and like, keep your mouth shut. You didn't say anything other than just ask a follow-up question. Can you expound on that? What do you mean by that? Keep your mouth shut. And that's what I was doing yesterday when we did the first draft.
But
of
you
this.
could. The purpose of this, we're not looking for a pity party.
No.
We're not looking for apologies. We're not looking for any of that. What we're doing is we want people to be aware.
I mean, I can tell you from
Love
somebody that
on your pastors.
sees these two off camera, I can tell you they don't care what you think. So
I don't miss the junk. I miss the people.
Yeah. You know what you mentioned earlier with the pastor, where you had, you know, you just kind of threw your resume in at that one church, and then they showed the personnel committee thing, and then you just said, "Don't forget it," and then you told that pastor that. You know, it's really funny how many pastors we've spoken to off camera, and they share the very same issues that we've been talking about, but they're too scared to say anything because they're worried about it. They're worried
Job
about their
security.
paycheck. So job security. I don't blame them. I was there, which is why I'm glad that, you know, I'm working a secular job and I have these opportunities to witness to people, and I still do ministry, and I'm still called to it, and I love it.
So all of that to say that as we go forward into this studying Scripture and we talk about our relationship with God and spending time with God, just be aware of the three of us, mine it's a little more strained relationship at the
I
moment.
think it's funny that I started this off by talking about the different perspectives we bring, because I literally had no idea that this was going to happen.
Well, guys, I think this was great. I hope people listen.
I'll be quiet next week.
Objectively,
I hope people actually listen.
the whole thing.
Yeah, don't give up.
Yeah. How many people are still with us at this point?
And they've all deleted.
Yeah.
Unfollow. Oh,
See,
well.
I think we're at the point of the podcast where we could literally say anything we want. We can name names, and nobody at this point is still listening. So it's like it doesn't matter.
Well, for those of you who made it to the end, thank you. And I hope you'll be with us next week.
Have your pet spayed and neutered.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening. For more information on DDS Faith Ministries, please visit our website at ddsfaith.org and follow us on social media. Thanks.